Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we plunge right into complex topics, trying to pull out those really essential nuggets of insight for you. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into strategic foresight. We're going to challenge some of the typical ways planning and decision-making happen, especially in, really complex places like government. We'll unpack why common tools, things like, say, compelling stories, or those nice simple dashboards, well, they can actually be surprisingly misleading. Sometimes they even lead to what you might call strategic paralysis.
Right. And we're going to explore a really powerful alternative, something that helps cut through that complexity. Think of it maybe as developing a kind of strategic weather map, something that helps you anticipate change rather than just, constantly reacting after the fact.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally about learning to actually see the landscape, understanding the forces at play.
Seeing the landscape. I like that. And for this deep dive, we're drawing from some really insightful material. It's actually humorously titled An Idiot's Guide to Anticipating Market Change, using something called Wardley Mapping. But honestly, don't let that name fool you. It's packed with some profound stuff. Our mission, like always, is to extract the absolute key nuggets, give you a shortcut to being well-informed on a topic that, let's face it, can feel pretty dense. Okay, so let's unpack this. When maps are lacking in an organization, what do we often do? We fall back on stories, right?
Narratives.
Yeah, we love a good narrative. These grand tales like digital transformation, they sound great, they're inspiring, they definitely help get funding, align the teams. But what happens when those stories, however good they sound, are ultimately, well, imprecise, maybe prone to bias, and really difficult to actually challenge?
Yeah.
The source material points out they're just not a substitute for strategy. It's a bit like a Viking navigator preferring epic tales over a confusing map they don't understand. The map's true, but it's just lines to them.
And what's fascinating there is how a compelling story, maybe about, say, citizen-centric services, it can actually mask a fundamental lack of understanding.
How so?
Well, it can hide what the actual components of that service are, or what the user truly needs. And this often leads to projects that, they're well-intentioned, absolutely, but they fall short, or they fail entirely.
Because the reality wasn't understood.
Exactly. The story sounded great, but the foundation just wasn't there.
I can definitely see how that happens.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to something called the Paul-Valery paradox. Valery, the poet, he famously said, "Everything simple is false. Everything which is complex is unusable." Do you think that perfectly captures strategic conversations, especially in government? You've got senior leaders demanding simple one-page solutions.
Right. Which are often false for complex systems.
Exactly. But then the comprehensive, maybe more truthful analyses from the strategists, those get dismissed as too confusing or not relevant.
Making them unusable in practice. Yeah, it's a constant tension, isn't it? You're caught between this, oversimplified view and an overwhelming one. Neither really helps you make good decisions.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, for decades, strategy's been treated almost like this secret tome, guarded by consultants, business schools.
The gurus.
Yeah. They come in, they produce these glossy reports, abstract charts, and then they leave. And the organization is often left trying to implement something it doesn't really understand or own.
And that blindness to the landscape, that's really the root cause of so much strategic failure. It means organizations get caught by surprise again and again. They invest in the wrong things.
So, okay, if the old ways, the narratives, the abstract reports, if they're broken, what's the alternative? This is where it gets, I think, really interesting. The solution isn't just another dense methodology, is it? Or more buzzwords. It's about learning to see by drawing a map.
That's exactly it. Wordly mapping, it isn't some kind of dark art. It's not reserved for elite strategists. It's actually built on 3 simple, really intuitive concepts. And once you grasp them, they fundamentally change how you look at things.
Okay, what are they?
So first, you need the anchor. Every map needs a starting point, right? You are here. In strategy, that anchor is always the user and their need.
The user need, not the organization.
No, that's the profound shift. You don't start with your department or your budget or your tech. You start outside in. It forces you to make sure every single component you identify later only has value because it serves that top-level user need.
Okay, like renewing a driving license. The anchor is the citizen needing that renewal.
Precisely. Then second, you have position. Once the anchor is set, you break down that need into the chain of components required to fulfill it. You keep asking what's needed for this to happen over and over. And these components get arranged vertically. The stuff most visible to the user is at the top, the foundational bits are at the bottom.
So for the driving license, you'd have the online portal at the top.
Right, which needs, say, identity verification, maybe payment processing,
Uh-huh.
which all depend on compute infrastructure, and ultimately power at the very bottom. It visualizes dependencies. It makes all that invisible plumbing suddenly visible.
Okay, anchor, position. What's the
The
third?
third is movement.
Mm.
This is the horizontal axis. It shows how components evolve, moving from left to right across the map. See, every component, an activity, a practice, data, whatever, it's subject to relentless supply and demand competition. And this pressure pushes it along a predictable path.
A predictable path.
Yeah, it's a fundamental climatic pattern. The rules are everything evolves, and crucially, there's no choice on evolution. If a better, cheaper, more efficient way emerges, well, the market adopts it, and that puts pressure on everyone else to follow.
Wow, okay. So this idea that evolution is non-negotiable, that's quite a statement. What's the biggest implication of that for, say, a public sector leader if adapting isn't optional?
It means that as components evolve across that horizontal axis, their characteristics change profoundly. What was once unique and bespoke becomes standardized, industrialized almost. The source uses that classic pets versus cattle analogy. It's really helpful.
Pets versus cattle.
Yeah. Early stage components, the custom-built things needing lots of care, they're like pets. You name them, you look after them individually.
Mm.
But utility components, the standardized stuff, they're cattle. Numbered, identical, disposable.
Ah, okay.
And mismanaging commodities like they're pets, showering them with bespoke care and investment when they should be treated like cattle, that leads to just colossal wasted public funds and missed opportunities.
Right. So you combine anchor, position, movement, and you get a Wardley map, a visual narrative.
Mm.
What does that map immediately tell you? What does it reveal?
It allows for immediate, quite powerful strategic insights. For example, the map might scream at you that you're custom building identity verification when the market's clearly shifting to provide it as an off-the-shelf product.
Or maybe that you're not using cloud compute like the utility it is.
Exactly. Or that you are. It confirms or challenges your assumptions. But crucially, it transforms vague goals, like improve citizen services, into specific, debatable points on the map. It provides a shared visual language.
Yeah.
Policy people, finance people, digital teams, they can all look at the same map and have a concrete discussion, moving beyond just, hand-waving.
And why the focus on these climatic patterns? You mentioned them earlier.
Because they're essentially the rules of the game. They're common economic patterns that influence your strategic landscape, regardless of what you do. Think of them like prevailing winds or ocean currents. You can't change them, but you need to understand them to navigate.
So things that feel random, like a new technology popping up or a supplier changing their model.
Often they're not random at all. They're predictable effects of these underlying patterns. Learning them transforms you from, like, a ship just being tossed about in a storm into a skilled navigator who can actually chart a course.
Okay, this sounds like it massively helps with managing uncertainty then. It changes your posture from reactive to proactive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changes your posture. Look, the future isn't just this uniform fog, right?
Mm-hmm.
Change can be categorized. There are known trends, like everyone knows cloud computing is widespread now.
Yeah.
There's little advantage in just seeing that.
Yeah.
Then there's the truly unknown, genuinely unpredictable stuff, like which specific new app will take off next year. Trying to bet heavily there is pure gambling.
Okay.
But the sweet spot, the place for real strategic advantage, is the knowable. These are trends that can be figured out beforehand, but most people miss them.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about government IT shifting to the cloud. For decades, departments ran their own data centers, right? Big capital investments.
Mm-hmm.
But the climatic pattern, everything evolves, predicted that infrastructure would inevitably become a utility. The signs were there in the early 2000s with things like AWS emerging. Now, leaders armed with that pattern could have anticipated this. They could have started building skills, changing procurement, planning a graceful transition. It could have saved hundreds of millions, increased agility massively.
Many didn't.
No, many were surprised. They reacted late, often got locked into expensive deals with legacy suppliers trying to catch up. They missed the knowable. Understanding these patterns helps make sure you're not caught off guard like that.
So what are some of the most critical patterns, the ones public sector leaders really need to get their heads around?
Well, the source highlights quite a few, but maybe 3 stand out as particularly powerful, really shaping strategic decisions every day.
Okay.
First, and maybe the most dangerous, is past success breeds inertia.
The nurture.
Yeah, this is a huge force, especially in big organizations like government. The more successful something was in the past, a decades-old mainframe, a long-term supplier contract, the more resistance there is to changing it. It's rarely a lack of new ideas that causes failure. It's the inertia holding on to the old success. This pattern helps you anticipate where that resistance will come from.
Makes sense. What's the second?
Second is efficiency enables innovation. This is kind of the positive flip side of inertia. When you do manage to overcome inertia and commoditize something,
Mm-hmm.
you don't just save money.
Right.
You unleash innovation. By industrializing the mundane, you free up capital, yes. But crucially, you free up talented people to focus on new value, higher up the stack, closer to the user.
Like gov.uk notify you mentioned?
Exactly. By commoditizing sending messages, GDS enabled hundreds of other teams to stop worrying about that plumbing and actually improve their service. It's this virtuous cycle. Genesis leads to evolution, which enables the next Genesis.
Okay, powerful. And the third?
Third is no choice on evolution, sometimes called the Red Queen's race, from Alice in Wonderland. You have to run just to stay in the same place.
Ah, right.
This is the engine driving the whole system. You might want to ignore that a component is evolving, maybe stick with your old way. But your competitors, or in the public sector, other departments, third sector providers finding more efficient ways, they won't ignore it. As some adapt, they gain an advantage. That puts pressure on everyone else. Standing still just isn't an option. The only choice you have is when you adapt.
Okay, so evolution isn't just movement. It's this transformation through distinct stages. You mentioned 4 earlier. Can you walk us through those?
Absolutely. The journey across the map isn't smooth. It's more like passing through different zones, each needing a totally different approach. First, you have Genesis. This is the realm of the truly new, the uncertain, the unpredictable. Think early government internet experiments in the 90s, or maybe initial attempts at using generative AI for policy today.
Very uncertain.
Totally. The focus here is purely exploration, learning, not reliable delivery. It needs what you might call a venture capitalist approach. Small bets, small pioneer teams, freedom to experiment, and importantly, freedom to fail and learn.
Okay, Genesis. What's next?
Next is custom built. This is where you've developed a bespoke, one-off solution. Maybe it shows real value, solves a specific problem, but it's inherently inefficient. It leads to duplication across the organization, fragmented user experiences, technical debt piling up. The focus here shifts from pure exploration to learning and refinement. You're trying to figure out how to standardize this thing for wider use.
That's your custom built.
Then comes product and rental. As understanding grows, a market emerges. You get standardized, off-the-shelf solutions. Think COT SaaS software, SaaS and platforms. Competition between vendors kicks in based on features, price, performance. The strategic challenge for you now is to be an intelligent customer. Avoid heavily customizing that product because that just turns it back into an expensive pet.
Got it. And the final stage?
Finally, we reach commodity and utility. This is the industrialized stage. The component is so well understood, so standardized, so ubiquitous, it's just treated as a cost of doing business, like electricity or basic cloud compute.
Reliable, cost-effective.
Exactly. It's valued for reliability and cost efficiency. Any differentiation is actually seen as a flaw. Leaders should be ruthlessly consuming commodities, driving efficiency to free up those resources for creating new value higher up.
So, as a component evolves, its whole nature changes. How does this characteristics change really hit strategy? And maybe more practically, how does it affect how we manage projects or even structure teams?
That's absolutely the key insight. You just cannot manage a brand new idea, a pet, the same way you manage a mature industrial process, the cattle. A Genesis component.
Yeah.
High uncertainty. Value is all future potential. Needs bespoke care. Manage it like a VC manages experiments. A utility. High certainty. It's a cost. Needs industrial management, predictable reliability, cost reduction.
So trying to use one approach for everything is bad.
It's disastrous.
Right.
The no one-size-fits-all pattern highlights this. Applying a single management approach across these totally different characteristics. It's a huge source of waste and missed opportunity. Take project management. You need Agile for Genesis, exploring, learning, adapting quickly. Think of the home office, maybe exploring new biometric tech at Borders. But for utilities, you need things like Six Sigma, maybe iTool frameworks. Focus is on reducing deviation, ensuring stability, operational perfection. Think about managing the core cloud infrastructure or gov.uk pay. You don't want agile changes, breaking payments.
Right, different tools for different jobs.
Exactly. And this applies everywhere. Team structure, too. You need pioneers, For Genesis, the innovators, comfortable with ambiguity. You need settlers to take those ideas, productize them, build scale, and you need town planners to run the utilities efficiently, focus on operational excellence.
Pioneers, settlers, town planners.
Yeah. An adaptive organization needs and values all three. Different cultures, different skills, applied to the right stage of evolution. It's not about one being better, it's about fit.
Okay, it makes sense. What's actually driving this constant evolution, this movement across the map?
At its heart, it's the relentless force of supply and demand competition. Demand for better, cheaper services drives suppliers to innovate. And then new, more efficient solutions raise the bar for everyone else. It creates this powerful, self-reinforcing cycle. It makes the evolutionary current basically unstoppable.
So it only takes one player to change the game.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
It only takes one actor in your ecosystem, maybe another department, maybe a supplier, to adopt a more evolved component, and boom, the game changes for everyone. If someone starts using a cheaper, more effective way to do something, that immediately redefines good. It puts immense pressure on everyone else to catch up.
How does that pressure show up in the public sector? It's not like departments go bankrupt.
No, but the pressure is real. It's about losing budget, losing influence, losing public trust. It comes in different forms. There's efficiency pressure. Other organizations deliver similar services cheaper because they've adopted utility components. The NAO, or equivalent, might start asking questions. There's effectiveness pressure. A new service, built using modern, user-centered practices, wins awards, gets positive press. Suddenly, public expectation shifts, and your older service looks dated. And then there's enablement pressure. Maybe another organization uses a utility data platform to create capabilities you can't match, like sophisticated predictive models. They're doing things you simply can't, leaving you behind.
And who usually kicks off these changes?
Often, it's what the source calls unencumbered attackers. Could be internal challengers, agile teams in neighboring departments, maybe third sector innovators, sometimes even a policy shock forcing a rethink. They typically start fresh, building on modern utility foundations. And in doing so, they expose the inertia of the incumbents.
Can you give an example of this playing out?
Yeah, the UK's digital identity journey is a great case study. Back in the early 2000s, you had the custom-built era. Systems like the government gateway expensive, bespoke pets, solving HMRC's problem. Other departments followed, inefficiently building their own versions. Massive duplication. And then, around the 2010s, you had the productization attempt with gov.uk Verify. The idea was to create a market of certified product suppliers. But it struggled, never really reached critical mass. But the inevitable pull to utility was always there. Relentless demand for simpler user experiences, greater efficiency. It ultimately led to gov.uk One Login, providing identity as a core national utility, simplifying things for users, reducing costs for government.
So the pressure just forced the evolution over, what, 2 decades?
Exactly. Regardless of the initial resistance or failed attempts. It demonstrates how that competitive pressure works. And it really helps challenge that our needs are unique, fallacy we hear so often. If multiple suppliers exist or other departments have the same underlying need, guess what? Your problem isn't unique. It's a candidate for standardization.
You can even stimulate that competition.
Yeah, you can publish open standards, you can use mapping to show competitiveness gaps, and build really strong business cases for adopting more evolved shared solutions.
This is fascinating. The source material makes a strong point that your greatest asset can actually become your greatest liability. How does that work?
Ah, yes. The past success breeds inertia pattern again. It's such a powerful gravitational force. It's deeply human, really, rooted in cognitive biases, sunk cost fallacy, confirmation bias.
We stick with what we know, what worked before.
Exactly. And in government, it gets amplified. Careers get tied to specific policies or systems. Teams have managed legacy IT for years. There are deeply embedded supplier relationships generating value for both sides. So challenging one of these profitable products isn't just questioning a strategy. It feels like questioning past wisdom, maybe even threatening departmental identity. Think Kodak, think Blockbuster. Their failures weren't because they lacked innovative ideas. It was inertia. Their past success blinded them.
So what are these profitable products in government terms? What should leaders be wary of?
It's any stable, successful capability that's central to how you operate now. Could be a flagship IT system, like an old welfare payments mainframe that still works. Could be an enduring policy framework everyone knows. Long-standing strategic supplier deals, even gold standard professional practices like specific type of economic modeling.
The things you're proud of.
Precisely. The things you take pride in are often your biggest strategic risk because you're least likely to question them. Imagine that hypothetical national vehicle licensing service we talked about, the one perfecting physical licenses. Their innovation, adding holograms, maybe a companion app, it was all about protecting that legacy physical product. It's exactly Kodak's flaw. Keep improving the film camera. Ignore the digital revolution.
Or Blockbuster clinging to late fees.
Yes. Blockbuster was addicted to the huge revenue from late fees. It stopped them embracing Netflix's subscription model, even though they saw it coming.
So what are government's late fees? What are those things that create friction but also protect the status quo?
Good question. They're often points of friction that inadvertently protect budgets or established ways of working. Things like really complex application forms. They justify large processing teams, fragmented services across different departments. They preserve those silos in their budgets. Opaque processes that citizens can't navigate. They necessitate expensive call centers.
Ah, those are the late fees being collected. And they create a strong incentive to resist simplification or change.
Absolutely. It makes inertia deeply ingrained.
So what are the actual barriers? What creates this inertia and why is it so hard to shift?
It's rarely just one thing, which is why it's so tough. The source breaks it down into three main types of barriers. First, you've got process inertia.
Like bureaucracy.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Think capital funding cycles that just don't work for cloud's OpEx model. Rigid governance, like using Prince 2, which demands detailed upfront scope for an exploratory Genesis project where you can't know the scope. Prescriptive procurement rules locking out agile startups. Even security theology that hasn't caught up with modern cloud security realities.
Okay, process barriers. What else?
Second, and often the strongest, is cultural inertia. This is about people. Fear of skills becoming obsolete, the server huggers clinging to old tech because it's what they know, a general risk aversion that stifles trying anything new, the builder identity teams who pride themselves on building things find it hard to shift to consuming utilities, and just plain old tribalism not invented here.
And the culture rewards sticking with the current model?
Often, yes. Rewards, promotions, recognitions, they reinforce the existing ways of working, making change feel threatening.
Okay, process, culture. What's the third?
The third is political inertia. Let's be honest. Strategic change creates winners and losers. It threatens established power structures. It means reallocating budgets. People protect their turf.
How?
Through alliances, spreading FUD fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the proposed changes, maybe even strategic leaks to undermine initiatives. A map is incredibly useful here because it makes this political landscape visible. You can see whose ox is being gored, who might resist, and why.
Wow. It sounds like a real uphill battle against all that inertia. Is there a positive side to this? A more optimistic view?
Absolutely. While evolution destroys old models, that destruction clears the ground for new creation. Commoditization, the process of things becoming utilities, is actually the engine of innovation. Every component that becomes an industrialized utility frees up vast amounts of capital, yes, but crucially, it liberates human talent from just maintaining the old world. It frees people up to build the new world.
So that efficiency enables innovation pattern again. It's more than just saving cash.
Much more. The financial savings are often the easiest part to quantify. But the real value is unleashing human capital from what the source calls the drudgery tax engineers, spending their days patching ancient systems instead of creating new value. This creates that virtuous cycle. Genesis begets, evolution begets Genesis. The evolution of one thing into a commodity provides the stable, efficient building blocks for the genesis of the next wave of innovation. Think about the standardization of the screw thread it enabled complex machinery. Think gov.uk, Notify, enabling hundreds of new service improvements.
Okay, so we free up resources, people, time. How do we use them to build the future effectively?
Through componentization. It's a shift in thinking. You build new, complex systems not from scratch every time, but by assembling pre-existing standardized parts, like building with Lego instead of starting with raw clay each time.
Lego bricks, standardized parts.
Exactly. And the magic is standardization and abstraction. A standard interface like an electrical socket or a software API hides all the underlying complexity. gov.uk pays API, for example. Service teams can just plug into it to take payments. They don't need expertise in banking, fraud detection, none of it.
It lowers the barrier to innovation.
Massively. And it allows continuous improvement behind that interface without disrupting all the services using it. That's the core idea behind government as a platform, or GAP, building reusable components.
And this leads to A never-ending cycle.
Pretty much, yes. It's the genesis begets genesis pattern. When a foundational component becomes a stable, cheap utility, it triggers what you might call a Cambrian explosion of new, higher-order services. Things that were previously unimaginable or just too expensive become possible.
Like the actual Cambrian explosion in biology.
Kind of analogous, yeah. Once basic biological building blocks were stable, life diversified rapidly. In tech, cloud commoditization enabled things like gov.uk Pay and Notify. It allowed rapid scaling during COVID. It enables mass data analysis we couldn't dream of before. The value constantly shifts up the stack, building on the commoditized layers below.
So the key strategic question for leaders becomes, okay, now that X is a cheap, reliable utility, what entirely new things are now possible for us?
Precisely. That's the essence of higher order systems create new sources of worth. It's about moving up the value chain. Now that compute is cheap, what large-scale data analysis can we do? Now that identity is becoming a utility, how can we radically simplify citizen journeys? These higher-order systems, the really valuable new stuff, they're born in that uncertain genesis territory on the left of the map.
Is there a trap here, though, when we're thinking about investing?
Oh, definitely. A big one. The certainty trap. As components evolve to the right, they become more certain, more predictable. But their differential value declines. Everyone can use electricity. The trap is that organizations, especially large ones, are often biased towards certainty. They feel safer investing in the known, industrialized right side of the map, maybe upgrading a legacy system again.
And they starve the left side.
Exactly. They starve the uncertain but high-potential Genesis domain. The real risk isn't betting, say, £100 K on a new AI experiment and having it fail. The real risk is betting 100 million in pensing, upgrading a legacy system that's facing inevitable commoditization anyway.
So it's about balancing the portfolio.
Yes. Leaders need to consciously balance investments across that certainty spectrum. High certainty, high return investments in utilities, driving efficiency. Medium certainty, medium return in products, staying competitive. And low certainty, high potential return bets in Genesis, exploring the future. That bet on gov.uk is a single domain years ago. That was a huge investment in uncertainty that paid off spectacularly.
Government loves a standard operating procedure, a single way of doing things. But the material screams, no one size fits all. Why is trying to apply a single management method so disastrous?
Because it completely ignores how characteristics change as things evolve. Arguing about Agile versus Prince2 is often pointless. They're suited for different things. If you apply a rigid, plan-driven method like Prince2 to a Genesis project, where uncertainty is high and you need to learn and adapt, you'll kill innovation stone dead.
Right.
But equally, if you try to apply Agile, with its focus on change and iteration, to managing a critical utility like core infrastructure, where you need stability and operational perfection above all else, well, you're introducing unnecessary risk.
So it's about using the right tool for the job. Agile for Genesis, maybe Lean for refining products, Six Sigma for utilities.
That's a good way to think about it, yes. Agile for Genesis. Focus on rapid learning cycles, embracing changing requirements, reducing the cost of failure. Think home office exploring new biometrics. Fail fast, learn cheap. Lean for products. Focus on eliminating waste, optimizing the flow of value, continuous improvement based on user feedback. Think gov.uk platform teams constantly refining based on usage data. Six Sigma or iTool for utilities. Focus on reducing deviation, ensuring stability, aiming for operational perfection. Think managing the cloud infrastructure or the reliability of gov.uk Pay.
In this principle, no one size fits all. It extends beyond just project management, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It impacts how organizations should allocate money, how they acquire capabilities, how they structure their people, budgeting. Maybe a venture capital model for Genesis, a portfolio of small, high-risk experiments. More traditional project-based funding for products with clearer business cases. And activity-based costing for utilities, focusing on driving down the unit cost within operational expenditure, OpEx. Purchasing. Lightweight, fast methods for Genesis you're buying and learning, not guaranteed outcomes. Managing competitive markets for products, think G-Cloud frameworks, avoiding vendor lock-in, and frictionless consumption for utilities pay-as-you-go, minimal procurement overhead. Team structure. We mentioned pioneers, settlers, town planners. Recognizing that you need all three types of people with different skills and mindsets is critical for adaptability. You need the explorers, the builders, and the operators.
This all sounds incredibly powerful for understanding the landscape, but how do we actually turn this foresight into, actionable advantage? The material lays out a 4-step process, right?
It does. It bridges the gap from just seeing the map to actually using it to navigate and make choices. Step 1. Sketch your landscape. First, you anchor your map to a clear user need. Then you map out the value chain visible components the user interacts with at the top, down to the foundational stuff at the bottom. The key here is not to get bogged down. Avoid common mistakes like just drawing a process flow, being too generic or way too detailed, forgetting the invisible plumbing-like power, or getting stuck in analysis paralysis. It's a hypothesis, right? Aim for good enough to start the conversation.
Okay, get a basic map down. Then what?
Step 2. Apply the patterns. Now you add that horizontal axis of evolution, genesis, custom-built, product, commodity, utility. Plot where you think each component currently sits. Use the cheat sheet of characteristics to guide debates and challenge assumptions with evidence. Ask, is there really a competitive market for this? Should this actually be treated as a commodity now? Then, you annotate the map. Draw arrows showing where things are inevitably evolving. Mark points of inertia, about those process, cultural, political barriers holding things back. Know where the Red Queen's pressure is building. This turns your sketch into a proper strategic weather forecast.
A weather forecast, I like that. Step 3.
Step 3. Identify the inevitable changes. Now you scan your forecast. Look for those knowable shifts. Where are custom-built things clearly becoming products? Where are overmanaged products ripe for commoditization? Where does widespread duplication scream utility needed here? Also, spot where your internal practices, funding, skills, governance need to co-evolve with the tech, and pinpoint the uncertainties, the areas of fog on your map. That tells you where you need flexibility, where you need to experiment rather than commit to a single path.
Like the Blue Badge example, payments and identity are inevitable commodities, but future eligibility policy is uncertain.
Exactly. You manage those differently. You plan for the inevitable commoditization, but build options for the uncertain policy changes.
Okay, so you forecast the weather. Step 4 must be deciding what to do about it.
Precisely. Step 4. Pinpoint threats, opportunities, and strategic plays. This is the so what moment, translating the forecast into actual choices. First, look for threats. Use the map to spot anti-patterns. Are you suffering from the overinvested pet wasting resources, coddling something that should be a commodity? Are you facing supplier lock-in where an incumbent is resisting evolution? Is your core system a fragile monolith that's impossible to change quickly? For the Blue Badge, that custom eligibility assessment engine is a threat if the market moves to configurable rules engines.
Okay, spot the threats. Then opportunity.
Yes, look for opportunities. Scan for newly industrialized components. Ask that key question. Now that X is a cheap, reliable utility, what entirely new things are now possible? Look for chances to build higher-order systems on top of those commoditized layers. See where value lies in simply assembling existing components, componentization, rather than building from scratch. For Blue Badge, commoditizing identity and payments frees up resources, maybe for proactive outreach using data. New possibilities open up.
And finally, you choose your plays.
Right. You select specific strategic plays from a whole repertoire of options based on your map. Maybe you decide to exploit supplier inertia. You could build or support a credible, low-cost alternative, maybe an open-source platform, to force an expensive incumbent supplier into a difficult cannibalization dilemma. Or you could use transparency as a weapon. Publish clear pricing, performance, security data for your new, modern offering to expose the poor value of opaque legacy systems. Or maybe you build a coalition. Use maps to show different departments they all suffer from the same duplication, the same inefficient custom build. That shared picture builds a powerful cross-government business case for shared platforms.
The material makes a striking point. Most competitors or other departments are essentially blind players because they don't map. Why is that our biggest advantage?
Because with a map, you gain situational awareness that others lack. You become, as the saying goes, the one-eyed king in the land of the blind. You can see vulnerabilities yours and others. You can anticipate moves, plan counter moves. Now, in the public sector, this isn't about corporate warfare in the traditional sense. It's about using that strategic insight to win the war against waste, inefficiency, and poor user outcomes. It lets you allocate resources far more effectively towards genuine public value.
Let's try and ground this with some really concrete examples. How does this thinking apply to something like artificial intelligence? It's everywhere right now.
Okay, AI. If we map the AI landscape, what do we see? Well, model inference, the basic act of running trained models, that's already becoming a utility. You pay cloud providers pennies to run inferences. Foundational models, things like the big large language models, they're evolving incredibly fast, moving from pure genesis towards being ruefully products, maybe even utilities soon.
So what's the strategic implication for government?
It means government probably doesn't need to spend billions trying to build its own massive foundational models. That's like trying to build your own power station today. The role is likely to be an intelligent user of this emerging AI electricity. The real unique value for government probably lies in its unique data sets and using them to fine-tune these commodity models for specific, niche, citizen-focused applications. Imagine a chatbot that can instantly answer complex benefit questions accurately because it's been fine-tuned on DWP data running on cheap commodity AI infrastructure.
To avoid traps.
Exactly. Avoid the sovereign AI trap, trying to custom build a global commodity. Avoid the magic box procurement trap, trying to buy one monolithic AI solution that does everything. And avoid the data is the new oil fallacy data sitting in a lake isn't valuable. It's only valuable when it's refined and used in applications, often to fine-tune these models. The value keeps moving up the stack to the specific application of AI.
Okay, interesting. What about something maybe more mundane, but that everyone's experienced remote work tools? Especially after the pandemic shift.
Yeah, that was a chaotic period, wasn't it? Mapping the remote work chaos initially showed lots of fragmented tools, separate things for video conferencing, messaging, whiteboarding, document collaboration, often treated as distinct products bought by different teams.
Lots of different tools.
But the inevitable consolidation is well underway. The Red Queen's race forces these functions into integrated platforms. Think Microsoft Teams, Google Workspace. These suites are rapidly shifting towards becoming utilities. The value isn't in the individual tools anymore, but in the seamless integration within the suite. Your choice isn't if they consolidate, but when you embrace that consolidation strategically.
And what new value emerges once that consolidation happens? What's the sunshine?
The commoditization of the basic tools enables a whole new, higher-order meta layer. This is where the new value is. We're starting to see AI-powered tools focused on things like improving asynchronous communication clarity, enabling trust-based performance management that isn't about surveillance, tools for deliberately building remote culture, integrating zero-trust security models seamlessly. The biggest opportunity isn't just changing the tools, it's changing how we work, enabled by those integrated commoditized tools, optimizing the human experience of remote and hybrid work.
So what are the strategic plays there?
Ruthlessly standardize on a single integrated suite. Pick one and stick to it. Invest heavily in adoption and training, not just deploying the tech. Shift your focus and investment towards that application layer, the how we work part. And actively, purposely decommission all those legacy fragmented tools to actually realize the savings and simplicity. The biggest challenge here is rarely technical, it's organizational. Overcoming the cultural inertia, the resistance to giving up familiar but fragmented tools for a standardized suite.
So wrapping this up, what does all this mean for you, our listener, trying to navigate your own strategic landscape?
Well, strategy, as we've explored today using these mapping concepts, it isn't a one-off plan. It's a continuous iterative cycle. It really embodies John Boyd's OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. That continuous cycle of sensing the environment and reacting. The map is your tool for the observe and orient phases. It's your rudder, transforming that reactive cycle into an engine for genuine anticipation. And remember, as the source wisely puts it, an imperfect plan executed today is better than a perfect plan executed tomorrow. Start mapping, even imperfectly.
Yeah, get started. And as we always say, you really learn this stuff by playing the game, by trying it out. This deep dive, hopefully, has armed you with the core concepts and tools to begin. But here's something maybe to mull on, a final thought for you. If, as the source suggests, future value is inversely proportional to the certainty we have over it, what's the most uncertain, high-potential idea simmering away in your own work right now? The one you're maybe not investing in, simply because it feels too risky, too uncertain.
What opportunities might you be missing because you or your organization are too focused on optimizing the knowns, the comfortable right-hand side of the map? That's the critical question a map helps you confront, and answering it can fundamentally change your strategic posture, shifting it from fear towards foresight.